Hello, my name is Matthew Gardner and I'm the Chief Economist for Windermere Real Estate and a proud supporter of Habitat for Humanity. I've been asked to speak with you today and offer a brief commentary on our economy here in Seattle, but more importantly, give you some of my thoughts about the local ownership housing market. Looking first at the economy, well, along with much of the rest of the nation, our area is basically still on hold. I do have to add that I did record this piece before the 1st of June, so I don't know whether Governor Inslee has or has not fully implemented Phase 2 of reopening the state, but my fingers are certainly crossed. I could talk at length about what I expect to see as we move through the balance of the lockdown period and give you a post-COVID-19 economic outlook, but as I only have a few minutes with you, I can't really say much more than to tell you that I am confident in our area's ability to bounce back when we are allowed to do so. There will be pain, there will be job losses, but we are very fortunate to have a diverse economy and a technology sector that continues to perform very admirably. We really are very lucky to live here. And that's an interesting segue into the more germane topic of housing. Our local housing market will be fine, even as we move through these uncertain times, but I have a very specific concern, and that is the lack of affordable ownership housing. From an economic standpoint, we are without a doubt a success story here in Seattle, but with success comes consequences. Through no fault of our own, we've attracted some great companies to our area, and this economic vitality has led to a lot of new jobs, which has led to considerable demand for housing. The trouble is that demand exceeds supply, and this has put significant upward pressure on home prices and greatly reduced housing affordability. King County is in a housing crisis, but unfortunately I believe that we've become blasé to that very statement itself. We hear it again and again and again, to a point that we decide it's just too big a topic and it can't be fixed. But what's equally as interesting to me is that when we think about the lack of housing, or even housing affordability, isn't it true that we consider it to be a rental market problem? That maybe if we figure out how to provide affordable rental housing, then the whole issue goes away. Unfortunately, the rental market gets most of the attention, with few groups interested in the provision of affordable ownership housing. But I believe that it's actually a bigger issue. And for would-be home buyers, well, the obstacles are huge. To give you some kind of perspective, the average sale price back in April for a single-family home in King County, $846,000. And the average list price of a home for sale in the county, well, that's just over $1.2 million. Housing is expensive, but isn't it reasonable to assume that incomes are equally as high? Well, not even close, I'm afraid. The median household income in King County, $92,500. So very many families can't even come close to affording to buy a home, and the gap is getting wider, not narrower. Over the past decade, single-family housing prices have risen by an average of 6.7% annually, almost double the annual increase in income. Of course, mortgage rates have dropped by about 2% in the same time period, but many families who strive to buy a home just cannot afford it. This chart attempts to demonstrate the affordability issue that we face here in King County. Prepared by the Washington Center for Real Estate Research over at UW, it calculates ownership housing affordability for all buyers and separately for first-time buyers. With affordability being measured at any number above 100, you can clearly see the county is not affordable for households making median income, and hasn't been since back in 2013 as we were coming out of the Great Recession. But more importantly, it has never been affordable for first-time buyers since the index was created back in 1994. But I also want to share a couple of other data points with you. I went back a decade and took a look at home sale data in the first quarter of 2010, as I was interested to see how many sales were technically affordable. Well, in the first quarter, there were 267 sales at or below a price that could be considered affordable. Now, that was just about 7.5% of total sales. Not a great number by any stretch of the imagination. Well, in the first quarter of this year, that number had dropped to 185 sales, or just over 4% of total sales in the quarter. But then there's this. The number of homes for sale today that are technically affordable, well, that number is just 40. That's correct. 40 homes in the whole of King County, less than 2% of all single-family homes for sale. You know, it'd be easy for me to wax poetic about how unaffordable Seattle is, about how pushing households further and further away from our job markets into areas that may be more affordable. That's not the answer, as all this really does is put significant pressure on our transit infrastructure and add significant transportation costs. But it's not really about that. Of course, it's important to be inclusive rather than exclusive when it comes to housing. But for the ownership arena, it's much, much more than that. We are all aware that income inequality has become pervasive in today's society. And it's that very inequality which is causing instability and keeping families who would love to be able to buy a home from doing so. And let me be clear, home ownership and stable housing go hand in hand. Why? Well, homeowners move far less frequently than renters and are therefore embedded into the same neighbourhood and community for a longer period of time. Last year, just 5% of homeowners moved, but almost 1 in 5, 19.7% of renters moved. I think that it's stability which is the key factor here. There are literally hundreds of academic papers that discuss the positive attributes that stability offers households and specifically children in these households, and how stability is very instrumental to their success as adults. The bottom line is this. Home ownership allows households to accumulate not only wealth, but social status. Today, over 65% of all households in America own their homes and are benefiting significantly. In essence, home ownership implies permanence, whereas renting implies mobility. Ownership implies pride and a sense of belonging. Homeowners are actually happier than renters, maybe because they've actually achieved the American dream. The economic and social benefits of home ownership are irrefutable. Unfortunately, however, public policy is more apt to think of housing as nothing more than a roof, and most of the government's attention is focused on the rental market as opposed to the ownership market, irrespective of the long-term health, social, and wealth benefits that home ownership allows. The task of providing affordable ownership housing is extremely daunting, but it is so very important. I'm sure that most of you, including me, own your homes, and I do wonder if we actually forget how lucky we really are. Yes, we've worked very hard for it, but the club should not be that exclusive. I sincerely hope that you will see your way clear to supporting Habitat, even though we are certainly going through a very stressful time right now. The pandemic will pass, but housing demand will not diminish. Habitat for Humanity is doing all that it can, but it needs our support. And I hope that, collectively, we can help more families achieve their American dream. Thank you.